welcome to the Walter Sisulu Square in Kliptown, Soweto. I'm Sigim Gabadeli. Now, it's been said that South Africa's revolution was the only one to have its own musical soundtrack. Our musicians, writers and artists voiced the pain and hopes of a generation. But what is the role of artists today in a democracy, but with so many problems like poverty? Is it fair to call those artists who are too close to the establishment sellouts? Or, as the public, are we to blame for not giving radical artists enough support? Well, to debate this topic, I'm joined by Mbongeni Ngema, internationally renowned playwright, producer, entrepreneur, and pioneer of a new jazz festival in Durban. Dr. Mogane Wally-Serote is an award-winning poet, novelist, former MK cadre, and former chair of the Parliamentary Committee on Arts and Culture. Simpiwe Dana, much-loved Afro-soul diva and campaigner on education and youth issues. Mike van Graan, playwright, arts activist and executive director of the African Arts Institute. And finally, Michelle Constant, radio broadcaster and chief executive officer of Business and Arts South Africa. So to our panel and to our audience here in Soweto, which is filled with writers, poets, actors, rappers, activists, and people who just love the arts, welcome to you all. Before we start our debate, let's take a quick look at this overview.
Sawubona, Dumela, Molo, hello. I am Mrs. Evita Besaidnote, and I am the South African ambassador to the independent homeland of Babetiko Sweti.
In the darkest days of apartheid, when unjust laws made it hard to criticize the regime, it was up to artists like Peter Dek Ace to find a way to undermine the system.
I've been unemployed since 1973 when the apartheid government said to me, you may not show your mond, wie dink jy is jy? And so I didn't shut up, but I did put on a dress. That did help. So my enemy fell in love with Tannie Evita, and they didn't know who to lock up eventually.
At home, music was inseparable from the freedom struggle. Around the world, artists like Miriam Makeba, Hugh Masekela and poet Wally-Serote took the message far and wide. Freedom is coming tomorrow. Playwright Mbongeni Ngema highlighted better than anyone the role of young people in the struggle. His play Sarafina went to Broadway and was made into a Hollywood movie.
After 1994, with the advent of democracy, most of the artists felt that that period of resistance and struggle had ended, and what they had worked for and struggled for had been attained, insofar as there was now a democratically elected government.
So in the new South Africa, not only could artists celebrate freedom, but the state they'd fought for could offer them a platform for their work. But was it artists' job to promote the Rainbow Nation? Cartoonist Zapiro, for one, was uncomfortable with the notion of a national project of reconciliation that everyone had to buy into.
I saw people in authority from quite early on take the role that no one asked them to take, which was to decide for everyone else what the national project was, and then to ice out anything that didn't fit into the national project.
Zapiro criticizes fellow artists for being too close to government. For example, when Ngema was given 14 million rand to produce Sarafina 2, a play about AIDS.
The first Sarafina was absolutely amazing, but he was kind of in the right place at the right time to, I'm afraid, for Sarafina 2 to sell out, because not only did he sort of take the money and run, but it absolutely didn't work.
But what makes an artist a sellout artist in the new democratic South Africa? After the Marikana massacre and the repression of protests from Sasolburg to the Doorns, some people feel that artists have to get involved in a new struggle against poverty, inequality and the abuse of power.
This is the reason why I write songs, why I write poems, what I die for. Another reason why I perform. I fight wars for black souls oppressed in the ghetto. Bring hope to all those about Congo.
Cape Town hip-hop duo Jargon Music feels artists who don't focus on the need to still work for a better dispensation are escapist artists. But is the country ready for this message?
Club owners have a problem if you won't pull a high number of people. So if you're talking about the stuff that we are talking about, it's a problem to them because they won't make their profit.
Simpiwe Dana recently compared the repression of poor people today with the state of emergency under apartheid.
Where are the youth of 1976? When our children die?
But artists who criticize government and business may be putting their livelihoods on the line if they find sources of income drying up. If they are lucky, they may get money from bodies like the National Arts Council, which is supposed to be independent of government.
The Arts Council lurched in the first 10 to 15 years from one crisis to the other because of inappropriate appointments.
Don't go to government, because the moment they give you money, they own you.
Inclusion and shared values were vital.
Now government has a new project for artists, which is being promoted through the Department of Arts and Culture. It's called Building Social Cohesion. Not all artists are impressed.
When you look at our society right now and look at those words, you find out that the implementation based on what the meaning of the word is, it's not visible. I cannot just be quiet watching that happening, watching a continuation of the so-called Bantu education happening in Limpopo, done by our government. Then we look and perceive what's behind our government. Then we understand that the dead man is still singing.
So our artists, like our society, are deeply divided. Some feel the time has come to support the government and the ruling party. For those who are disillusioned, any artist who celebrates with government and keeps quiet about present-day injustice is a sellout.
So I would say to people like Utatumbonga Ningema, Nabo Babu Walisirot, how dare you be happy when this is happening?
Let me start with you. I mean, internationally acclaimed playwright, Woza Albert, Asina Mali, Sarafina 1. So did you sell your soul to the ANC with Sarafina 2?
No, it had nothing to do with the ANC. It had everything to do with the AIDS pandemic at the time when the minister, Nkosazana Zuma, at that time, felt that the message about AIDS had to be spread to the poverty-ridden societies of South Africa.
At 14.2 million rands. I'm sure you didn't pay that for Sarafina 1.
No, it was more than that. Sarafina 1 was much more expensive. To do that kind of a production on Broadway will cost you about 30 million.
I'm talking about in South Africa, not on Broadway.
You have to remember the value of the rand at a time when we did Sarafina.
So are you telling me that productions such as Woza Albert, productions such as Asina Mali, other productions that were telling the story of apartheid cost more than 14.2 million rand in 1985-86 terms?
You're talking about a two-man play, Woza Albert. Sarafina 2, you're talking about a crew of about 100 people touring for 52 weeks throughout South Africa.
Mike from Hard, I mean, one thing you have been is very critical of those who work closely with government. What's wrong with that? If government says to us that this is the national priority that we should be following, what's wrong with working with government?
Well, what if government says to us, for us, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is what we believe is the right way to go for our country. And we will make funding available for those arts companies and theatres that do work that basically promote that agenda. I, as an artist, might believe that, in fact, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was a complete sellout. So if I want to do a play about that, am I going against what my government wants me to do, and so I will therefore not access funding? I think that what needs to happen in a democracy is that public funding needs to be made available for artists to exercise the constitutional right to freedom of creative expression.
Simpiwe Dana, you called for a national state of emergency in 2012. What on earth did you mean?
Well, I think he touched on the issue of the lack of justice. And I think a month or two after the song was released, Marikana happened. I think the issue is actually two-pronged. One, we don't really understand what happened in '94 or what '94 was meant to achieve. And then secondly, we don't understand our role today.
What do you think happened to artists post-1994?
Well, I think what happened to artists is what happened to everyone else. You felt we had now arrived to freedom, and we had to make do with what we had. And we also had to show that we are in solidarity with this notion of rainbowism.
Do you feel that it was imposed on us? Because there's a question around who dictates the agenda, and it was made, I think, by Zapiro in the insert.
Well, I mean, I think it is quite telling that when you ask certain questions, you know, society at large tries to silence you. You know, it's almost like they have been groomed themselves to...
All right, so let's bring in Wally Serote into this conversation. You were chair of the Parliamentary Committee of Arts and Culture for I'd say, about 8 years, from '94 to 2002. Do you think that you avoided being the sellout black leader that she's talking about while you were working in government, having been the kind of poet and writer that you had been and you continue to be?
Well, the last black sellouts that I heard of were when we were talking about the Bantustans. Since then, in 1994, I don't know who we are talking about when we say that. I don't know.
Wouldn't it be people who align themselves with those who are in power, whether they're in government or in business, and therefore do not say the things that need to be said for fear of losing their financial gain? Maybe that's the definition of a sellout post-1994.
But who has been punished for saying anything against government now? Do we know?
There are many people, so let's not pretend that there are people who have not, because they've said certain things. Simpiwe herself, at some point, was not getting gigs because her tone was not liked. Let's not pretend it's not happening.
I am the last person to pretend. I'm saying to you, I don't know. Maybe I should be educated. If I'm educated, I'll listen. But as I sit here, I don't know who was detained, who was punished, who has been imprisoned. I don't know. All I know is that there has been very serious attempts to create a democracy in this country. There has been a very serious attempt to create non-racialism, non-sexism. That I know.
And how has that impacted on the arts?
The context of any arts is the society. In this society, the first and most important thing that must happen is what do we do to emancipate the African voice in this country? Nothing has been said about that. The African voice was muted from beginning of colonialism to date, even now.
You know, we are known as a country as the protest capital of the world at the moment. People are protesting at an average of 15 a day. In other words, the African voice has been released, and they are protesting against the conditions in which they find themselves in post-1994 South Africa. What is muted is the voice of the artist in alliance with the poor, and which we see. And I think also, to come back to what Dr. Serote was asking earlier on about where have you seen people being suppressed. First of all, there's the labeling: racist if you're white, traitor or ultra-leftist if you're black, treasonous if you're a bank. There's an economic kind of censorship. Do not publish the kinds of things in your newspaper or we'll draw our advertising budgets from you. But worst of all, there is violence. Even within the ANC, there are people who have to have bodyguards because they are not of the faction that has to be elected. So when artists kind of see that within our society, people much bigger than they are, people in alliance with the ANC, people who are members of the ANC, are under threat in these kinds of ways, there is an incredible degree of self-censorship that has occurred.
And let's talk self-censorship, because it was the conversation we were having also as well. And I'm going to read a poem that you wrote called Third World Express.
Hello.
And I'll read it for the audience, okay, if I can read it. And it goes, how did we come to be here? In Iraq, where flesh and fire merge, or Pol Pot, where skulls are packed neatly as if they are eggs when they are white bones, and have holes they bear useful, or Bush, where to defy his interest can cost lives, lives, countless lives, maimed nations of orphans. How did we come here? It's a brilliant poem. I love this poem. It takes on power. It speaks to the most powerful leader at that time in the whole world who was suppressing people in another country. Have you written something about that, about Marikana?
I will.
Why haven't you?
I will. But are you going to dictate to? Are you going to dictate?
I'm not dictating. I would never think to dictate
right. Then I'm
to you.
saying to you, I will when the time comes. I don't want to be fashionable. I want to understand Marikana for what it is.
All right. Michelle, is there a middle road here? You know, we've got a position where Wally Serote is saying to us that there's a context, that there's an African voice that is muted. We've also talked a little bit about self-censorship, where people may be concerned that they're going to lose business should they say ABC, and we've seen examples of that, whether people want to believe them or not. Is there a middle road?
I don't know. I think it's extremely challenging to be an artist. I wonder why we have this question around selling out, and I think that Mike raised this issue of what kind of selling out are we talking about? Are we talking about political selling out? Are we talking about economic selling out? And you know, when you talk about economic selling out, man, every artist has the right to sell out. In fact, they want their entire theatre to sell out. They want bums on seats. They want to sell their paintings. So yes, let them sell out. It's up to the artist to choose. So yes, some artists may choose to sell out, if you want to put that in inverted commas. I don't think artists are selling out, actually. I think that society has sold artists out.
And we'll get there. And when we come back, one of South Africa's top rappers is going to drop some lines. You're watching The Big Debate.
They just wanna be fresh and they wanna be cool. Give them a little money and they think they rule. But I hope we better than that. 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 We better than that.
Now in the struggle, they used to burn traitors. I guess that's how they could separate us. Nowadays it's money and political favors. Politicians wanna be celebs and famous. Celebs wanna be politicians by faces. I guess our society has gone pretentious, and when you talk the truth, they say that you're envious. I'ma be blatant, cause now this is strenuous. Media undermine us, they even offend us. Radio don't play us, so they don't recommend us. Journalists with scandals to misrepresent us. Meanwhile, they build the companies of the oppressors. For minimum wages, they make us look lesser. So who should the kids look up to? America? Of course, our heroes are downplayed by editors. So why blame white people when we can credit us for our own lack of progression that we bring to us? And we think that we progressive, but we're delusional.
Cause these blacks are fools, they just wanna be fresh and they wanna be cool. Give them a little money and they think they rule. But I hope we better than that. 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 We better than that.
And as you've seen, we are better than that. I just want you to know.
Slicker.
Yes.
You got into a lot of trouble for that song, didn't you?
No. Trouble.
You got into a lot of trouble. Let's think about it. The reaction, I mean, I'm on all the social networks.
Yeah.
The reaction there, you had political parties issuing, press statements about the song. Did you expect that? What did you think when you got it?
Well, I heard this song 2 years after I wrote it. And I was just going through a reflection, and I was saying, Siyabonga, most of the songs you've done have been what the market wants to hear. What are you about? What do you really want to say? And when I heard the song that I wrote, I just put out money from my pocket. I shot a video, directed the whole video and the whole concept. I had a whole PR plan, and I literally set it out that way because I was like, if I'm going to pay for a video to sell a CD, I'm going to pay for a video to spread a message at whatever cost, you know?
And I wasn't troubled by anything. You must always remember that, like, you're here for a bigger thing. And like, let's say once again, I understand I'm working within a system that is not built in our favor as South Africans, and where we need to go.
Ngema, let's talk about the cultural context that he's talking about, because I want to talk about who frames that. We had, particularly in the early 90s, after post-apartheid democracy, there was a narrative. The narrative was, we are reconciling, this is a rainbow nation, we started the process of social cohesion. Is it government's role, though, to tell us what the national project is?
Well, it's not entirely government, but we cannot shy away from the fact that they are the government. Therefore, they are the leaders of our society, of our country, of our communities. So the reason why most artists today do not protest against government is simply because we actually put this government in place ourselves.
A lot of your criticism has spilled over from your music to tweets to what you write, Simpiwe, and people have reacted differently. Lots of supporters, but some have said, well, hello, what do you know about solving the education crisis for a moment? Just do what you do best and just sing. How do you react to that?
Well, I don't know if it's just in South Africa or if it's a worldwide phenomenon. But there has been this new mandate now that we're supposed to follow as artists, and that is to entertain and not deal with social conditions of your supposed constituency. You see who gets really admired by the media. You must be eloquent, and you must act like a lady, you must not touch certain topics, you must always be smiling and make everyone happy. That has become the description of an artist these days.
And whose fault is that? I love the word fault.
Well, I think on the artist side, it is our fault that we've allowed that to happen. But I think overwhelmingly the problem is with society that insists on that from us.
All right, what do you think? Let's get some comments, and I'll start with you, Sandile Mamela, Chief Director for Social Cohesion at the Department of Arts and Culture.
Of course, yes. I think what I want to state clearly and loudly is that before I joined government, I worked in the private media, so-called. I was fired in the private media for being uncontrollable simply because I raised issues that white capital is uncomfortable about. I'm mentioning this because it's very important for people to realize that to be free, to be independent and courageous in our cultural context doesn't mean that you need to be anti-government. You can speak anything that stirs in your soul. If you think you're going to get a bouquet of flowers for that, or you're going to win friends and influence people, you're deceiving yourself. It's a decision that an individual takes to be an agent of freedom of expression. Now, one point that I want to say is that, when it comes to government, the legislative mandate, for instance, of the Department of Arts and Culture is for us to promote and protect and entrench freedom of artistic expression. When artists don't exercise that right, it's not the government's fault. When the Spear debacle happened, government didn't say, don't do that. They said, are you careful? Do you know the implications of what you do? Because we don't want artists to plunge this country into war that we have avoided. It's about time that we clarify these things.
Right, and Michelle, Sandile makes a very important point, because even with business funding of whatever, you're going to find that he who pays the piper calls the tune.
It's a business relationship between the artist and the business. I absolutely agree with Simpiwe. I think that the challenge has been that there are expectations of what artists are expected to do. Unfortunately, you can't put the responsibility onto business to make sure that those expectations are met or not met. A business will choose to fund the arts for a variety of reasons, and those reasons could include corporate social investment, so they have to address the triple bottom line. It could be marketing. it could be
But hasn't
seen
it shifted quite a lot towards marketing, though?
It has shifted,
Yeah,
and in fact,
isn't that a part of the problem?
The BASA research has seen that over the last 10 years, funding for the arts, which originally came from businesses out of corporate social investment, is now very strongly in the marketing terrain. I do think that that is an issue, and I think that one of the issues with that is it does mean that they are expecting something from the artist and that relationship has to be met. But the second thing that I think is hugely problematic about that is that we sit in this economic climate at the moment, and the first thing that goes are the marketing budgets.
And the contribution from the lotteries, as we know, also lots of money being sat on there.
I have serious objections with the manner in which the lottery handles its funding. I think it is too bureaucratic. I think even the manner in which people have to apply and return whatever forms have been sent to them, it's extremely laborious and almost inaccessible.
Right. This is the big debate.
One of the biggest roles that I believe that any artist, their role is to be the voice of the voiceless. And it is so unfortunate that at this time and age, the people that are supposed to be the voice of the voiceless, they are more concerned about the money and all that. And they are forgetting their social responsibilities. They are forgetting that they have masses out there who are depending on them to raise issues of poverty, to raise issues of rape, to raise all those kind of issues. We've got artists in Zim, we've got Oliver Mtukudzi, who till today, he is the voice of the Zimbabweans. We've got Salif Keita, who still today is the voice of the Malians. What happens to our South African artists?
I'm perturbed by the fact that there is Marikana, there is Sosolberg, there is Tidorans, there is everything everywhere. And we sit here and say, no, there's nothing wrong, everything is just okay. We've been involved, I'm from Azapo. We've been involved in cultural and artist struggle pre-1994. What happens post-1994? The same thing happens, but it's different. In this case, you don't go to prison, but people are afraid, and there is intolerance. People are not going to tolerate anybody who exercises and expresses herself or himself. But the masses are doing that in the places that I have mentioned. They're not artistic, they're not sophisticated, but they are doing it. And in the same way as the white or the elite of the past were not able to understand what was going on the ground in 1976 and so on, I think we have come to a position now, those of us who have made it, to want to understand or to ask questions as to what is it that you are talking about? Everything is okay. Why are you talking about Marikana? Everything is okay, don't worry. It is because people have forgotten themselves. They have arrived. There are problems in this country, and we are saying to the artists, because the artists of yesteryear had to be mobilized. They were afraid, they had to be mobilized. Artists must be mobilized now so that they can have free expression. Thank you.
How dare government, when artists are raising their voices and then they send the police to arrest the artist? I'm a victim. I'm talking from experience. Those constitutional rights you are talking of, they've never worked. And I don't believe they will work. We should ask the very same leaders who we voted for in order to liberate our movement, why are they selling us? What they are doing, they are busy selling out, and we are afraid to express our views.
I think for us to say government antagonize artists, it is improper. Because order, Chief. It is improper because it is clear that artists are self-censoring. Chief, Earlier on, a question was posed to Slika to say what has been the reaction and the reception. Were you subjected to harsh conditions pertaining to your lyrics? He never got to say, yes, government dealt with me. So I think it is not correct to take those allegations and behave as if we have cases that are confirmed. Let's not confuse the issue of social bag and that of artists. Those are two different cases. Thank you.
Guys, you are now touching a very sensitive one. Tina, singama artist, baningi abantu abala. Baboshiwe have been arrested several times. Because we've been fighting the people who are selling our activity and cities on the street. We've been arrested. People baphuma ngamabail. Abanye bashaywe balimele. With people abalinyaziwe baba konje bavuka ebhedlela bafile. Tina, we are part and parcel of these victims.
I'm going to take this opportunity to speak on behalf of the previously advantaged. But Dr. Serote, if I am in a position where I'm comfortable as an artist, you talked about pre-1994 artists were being detained and they were suffering in all the ways that we can actually see and understand, but you were asking a number of times afterwards, who are these artists now? And I haven't seen any artists suffer. And I'm saying, and it's been mentioned here before, that if I'm an artist and I'm sitting with the freedom of a voice and an audience, shouldn't I be looking for the people who have been arrested and detained and murdered, who have no voice, who haven't been able to speak? Or am I supposed to be sitting back and saying, look, it hasn't happened to me, so I can't complain? I'm trying to understand what my role is in the emancipation of the African voice. Or is that role simply to shut up and wait until I'm spoken to or need to be heard?
Dr. Soraki?
I don't know why you're asking me that question. But you see, I'm a South African. And being a South African, I stand firmly on fighting for democracy. I expect you to do the same thing. I expect you to take the trenches and fight against racism. Full shot, not halfway. So you and I can do that together. I don't understand when artists enter the quagmire of self-censorship. I don't understand that. We never succumbed to self-censorship. Why now? Let us test whether this democracy is real. Because if it is not real, we have to make it real. Nobody is going to make it real for us.
And what do you feel about that, Mbonganigema? Do you feel that it is possible to be courageous? And what would you say to someone like Iwok who says, what is my role in this society? Is it about who you are, what you look like, and who makes the criticism, if it's going to become acceptable or not?
I think all of us must have a voice. Whoever sees that there is something that is not going right in our society, every one of us have that responsibility. It is not only a chosen few.
I think we also have to understand that oppression has become quite sophisticated in that you can be shamed into silence and you silence yourself, and that is something that we have not really thought about, as part of this discussion. Everyone seems to feel like we're doing these things to ourselves. We are not. There has been a lot of courageous artists, myself included. The issue is that between who plays our music and the audience, there is a certain level of dictatorship that happens, where we get dictated to what kind of music can be played on radio. Because now even the listener is conditioned to like a certain type of music. When you come and you talk about Marikana, the state of emergency, they're like, man, we just want to party. Where's Beyonce? Where's this? Why are you bringing us down? So I don't know how it is in Zimbabwe. It could be that it's different. But here, true artists are facing an onslaught from our own.
Well, after the break, we're going to take a look at some art that has been called outrageous. And we ask, is there a line that socially conscious artists should not cross for fear of offending sensitive South Africans? This is the big debate.
If artists who remain silent in the face of injustice are sellouts, what about those who do speak up? Is there a line that they should not cross for fear of causing offense? If so, what is it defined by? The Constitution? The morals of the majority? Foreign relations? The dignity of our leaders? Cartoonist Zapiro has twice been sued by the president for defamation. Zanele Muholu's photographic exhibition at the Constitutional Court was abandoned at the last minute by former Arts and Culture Minister Lulu Xingwana, who said Muholu's photos harmed the government's efforts at nation building and social cohesion.
Robert Gabriel Mugabe, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Zimbabwe. Help me God.
Some would say that South African musicians freshly ground crossed the line and risked offending people with their song Chicken to Change about Robert Mugabe. The song got them banned from Zimbabwe.
Physically, the makeup of the band is mostly white. There was this notion that, who are you guys to criticize our, what was one of the leading black governments on the continent.
And welcome back to the big debate. So is there a line that artists should not cross?
Can't dictate to people what their personal taste must be. And whereas something I might feel is in bad taste is needed to be said because it's a public discussion.
At the end of the day, I think it lies with choice. And there are issues of bread and butter here. And sometimes I think artists do sell out. And when reality is, you've got 2 kids that you have to take care of. And there's a social voice that you also need to flourish. Which one do you choose?
Nothing wrong to criticize, but there's everything wrong when you become selective like Brett Murray did, who naturally has got a Western Cape background, and he resides in Western Cape, where provincial government was scandalous in terms of open toilets and all those things, but not anywhere in his earlier exhibition or work did he depict that, but rather chose to depict issues that has got to do with the president.
In the town where I come from, in Mthatha, an artist last year got his name taken out of the list of the performers because in his band he had gay performers and dancers, So artists now are feared, so they have to check how is what they are doing accepted by the entire, that is the government officials or the municipal officials.
Mine is a response to Dr. Wally Serote. He made a statement here that the African voice is muted. And I felt disturbed sitting here this evening because I thought, how could the African voice be muted when they are now in charge? They are the majority in that parliament. So if the African voice is now muted, it means those that we gave the mandate to not have the political will, maybe it is time for change so that the things that we're talking about here this evening can really be addressed by people who have the political will. Dr. Serote, the apartheid government was physical, it was psychological. The current government is psychological, and that is most dangerous and effective.
Firstly, let me congratulate Simpiwe Dana for the step that she has made in terms of speaking for the people who are mostly like voiceless. So congratulations for that. And I also hope that most artists will take an example from you and follow your footsteps. One of the questions that I have, it goes to the government or to the Department of Arts and Culture. It goes by, I want to know where do the department draws the line when it comes to artists, what they should sing about and what should they portray and all of those things.
What we should do as artists is to contribute in a significant way to build a new nation and promote social cohesion. If you think that is propaganda, go back to your own constitution. You'll realize that actually that's the society that we want to build. And why should anyone have a problem with that?
There shouldn't be a system that censors artists, but there is. And I think that's what we need to deal with. Because, I mean, I found myself being kicked out of a program as well by the Department of Gauteng, where I said I auditioned with the poem, and then all of a sudden it was like, no, sorry, you're counter-revolutionary and you're going to affect our funding. And when I want to speak out and follow the gift and the message, then everyone praises you on Twitter, but I still have bills to pay. And that's what the artist is faced with.
I find tonight extraordinarily complicated because on the one hand, we see extraordinary acts of freedom on these screens, and we have got enormous space for that freedom. On the other hand, we hear a pressure about an African voice, and then I worry about what the academics call essentialism. Which African voice? The white African voice, the polygamous African voice, the gay African voice, the feminist African voice. So that kind of thinking, I think, is blocking the debate. But everybody has a right to block the debate, and everybody has a right to fight for the debate. And artists shouldn't regard themselves as somehow specially chosen. We're probably in the second phase of the revolution, as Joe Slovo might have said. And, you know, these things that are happening all around us actually is what makes South African art extraordinary and has made it extraordinary since the 60s or even further back. We live in a most complex, most powerful, most contradictory, most fueled country. And in a sense, as hard as that is, we should be thankful because that is the fire that makes our art so extraordinary all over the world.
You want to talk about the fact that Brett Murray came out, painted a painting criticizing Jacob Zuma, and you were saying he shouldn't have done that because he was being selective, he didn't criticize Helen Zille, all right? But what we're saying is there should be no line. If an artist comes out and criticizes, he should know that he's going to be or she is going to be checked by another artist who might come out and say, I'm in support of Zuma, I'm going to criticize Helen Zille. And that is what we're talking about, the openness for that to happen, to allow that to happen. Not to say, just because you're speaking about this, you shouldn't speak about that. We are saying, speak about it all. Let us talk about it all.
I'm going to get final words, maybe just also anything you want to pick up on from what's been said from our audience members as you give us your final word, and I'll start with you, Mike Fikron.
In terms of crossing the line, you know, we have a very diverse bunch of communities in our country. We all have different values, different ideas, different histories, different exposure to art, different levels of arts education. We're not all going to appreciate the same things in the same way. And the reason why we have a constitution, a constitutional court, is to kind of bridge or determine what is right in the context of that diversity. So, for example, some people believe that homosexuality is not particularly African, but our constitution asserts that it is a premise of our democracy. And although 90% of our people might believe that the death penalty should be reinstated, our constitution says no. So similarly, with regard to crossing the line, the principle is that artists have the right to freedom of creative expression. That is our constitutional right.
I'm not going to say something different from what other people have said. You know, the point that I can gather from this room is that people are very heated up. People feel that there is a voice that is being silenced. But I think that we can walk out of here feeling comfortable and knowing that there is freedom of expression, and people just have to express themselves without fearing the repercussions. Just like in the olden days, we knew that we may end up in jail or being shot at or being hacked to death, but we carried on. So I don't think that it is travesty today to go and criticize the government if there is an issue that you want to criticize.
And from you, Michelle?
Very powerful that we cross the line to make things right. And I think that we need to give kudos to the artists who are constantly asking the question. The role of the artist is to ask the question, not to give the answer. and we should celebrate them for that. And in any democracy, we should celebrate creative dissent, because that's what makes us proud to be South African. Every day we see incredible art. We see people like Simpiwe talking consistently. And I would like to just applaud that and say that it's important that we recognize that and acknowledge that, and that we see that in our education in schools. If we do not have more support for the arts in schools, we will not have support for the arts as adults.
Simpiwe, your final comments?
I just want to say that someone over there spoke about what happened to the artists. You know, they used to be the voice for the people and all of these things. Well, I think the people are no longer there to support the artists as well. You know, there's also that. You know, we have now become like voices in the wilderness. You know, and you will find the biggest opposition from those same people that we're supposed to be doing what we do for.
And speaking for. All right. Final word, Dr. Sellout?
We fought for a constitution. The constitution is in place. And I think one of the tenets of the constitution says, my right cannot violate your right. And I think that is where the responsibility of the artist is. My right must never violate your right. Malcolm Peki, I thought you were an African. I was very shocked when you isolated yourself from being an African and you talked outside of that context. The African voice must be liberated in this country. We're sitting here, we're speaking English. What would have happened if there were artists who speak only Venda or Zulu? Are there facilities to facilitate for them? No, we didn't even think about that. Their voice must be liberated in this country so that they can speak in the language that they are most proficient in. I'm educated. I'm still not very proficient in English. What about if I've never been educated? We must think about those things as creative people. What facilities are we putting in place so that whether I'm a Khosi or a Nyanga or coming from initiation or whatever, I can speak with my mind proficiently. In a very volatile society like ours, I cannot just do what I want to do. I must be very careful. Do I contribute to building this nation or do I build to destroying it? That's my responsibility as an artist. Thank you.
South Africa, of course, as a society, very divided. Question we need to ask is, should our artists be working alongside government and business to unite the nation, or should they be exposing the divisions between us and speaking truth to the powerful in their works? If they fail to speak truth to power, have they sold out? You decide. Thank you very much for watching The Big Debate.